Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. And we're here again with our special guest host, Michael Fearon. And we thought we'd have a discussion on education and school. So Michael has a background in education, and we thought we'd go into a little bit about kind of the history of education, why it is, kind of how it is, why is it even important in the first place, and then maybe go into a little bit of some of the future prospects of what's in store for education and school in the future. So yeah, Michael, if you don't mind starting us off a little bit, maybe a trip down memory lane from a historical perspective. Where did kind of, well, we're going to focus more on the post-secondary system in this discussion, and then maybe we'll go to some of the other areas, but we'll focus more on that. So if you can give us a little bit of a 101 on what you know about the post-secondary history, then I think we can learn a lot from there.
Sure. Well, this is going to be an abbreviated history. It's not going to be the perfect history. And I know history buffs out there will check me and fact check me on it and go like, oh, you missed this point. But, here's a short form of really education history. And I would start way back in the day in the Middle Ages somewhere. And I think about the monastic movement, and I think about the establishment of churches that were dedicated towards just recording documents. And pretty much in these places, you needed people that could write and read and copy them down. And because it was a great place to send your third or fourth son that wasn't likely to get land, you'd send them on over there. And that's really where we get our concept of the university system, from that idea of recording and then mastering and understanding of really philosophy or theology. And where the transition starts happening is by 1179, pretty much the church started deciding that, everybody who was too poor to afford school or some basic education needed to get taught somewhere. So, the church would then provide that service. And as we go further forward, we start having the establishment of actual universities with core curriculums, focusing on things that everybody thinks of as being really university topics today: science, mathematics, theology, philosophy, and ancient history, because back then everything before them was ancient, whereas now they're ancient to us.
Right.
Where you start getting really interesting super or major changes is pretty much in the 9th century. It starts becoming the idea that education or basic education, so basic reading, basic math, was key to making a better or civil society. It kind of gets tied into some of the colonial ideas of, we have the French Empire at this time, we have the British Empire, we have Germany and Spain all trying to compete with empires, and they needed people to administer this empire. And to administer these things, you need some form of math to figure out where the money's moving. You need to be able to read because, the king's going to send you an edict at some point, and you're going to have to read it out. All these things are going to start coming together, and you needed educated people. So because of that, there's this push towards developing major education, but at that point, you're not necessarily learning things as structured as you think of it today, as you have a math class from 10 to 9, which is a weird time to have it, but 10 to 11, that's more correct. You have a lunch break at 11 to 12, 1 o'clock, you have English. That concept doesn't really start taking hold, because during this time period, you'd go to school for some basic skills. If you wanted to become a manager, you'd pay for high school. If you were upper class, you were going to get to go to university as a status symbol, but really you're going to apprentice to get your job. Your doctor, your lawyers, your public officials, they're really apprenticeship or relationship roles that allowed you to get the job. This really changes after the Great Wars, especially since the idea of the aristocracy being great is kind of diluted and washed away during the wars. It's kind of viewed as like this tragedy of humanity. And when you brought everybody back from the wars, you needed some way of getting people to reintegrate into normal society. And what that really became a focus on was the idea of putting people into a university system or some kind of civil social system that allowed people to have social mobility and reintegrate into society. And that's really where the idea of university for everyone comes up, and the blocking and the streaming of a lot of our education into you will be a farmer now, you will be an accountant, and this is decided by what you see on your high school's course selection with the open college university course selection option, the U, the C, and the O. So that's kind of just a quick hyperdrive version of the history of our education system in some sense.
Yeah, and I found that really interesting because if you kind of play that back, I mean, we really didn't have the same concept of kind of university college until like the 1940s. So that's really only kind of like 80 years ago, one or two generations ago, where our grandparents probably wouldn't have had that same kind of expectation. Whereas now, well, especially in Canada, it seems like university seems to be the almost obligatory route, right? Everyone seems to need to, because you're just competing at that level where it's almost like, why don't you have your university? But with our parents, like that wasn't even a major consideration, right? Well, parents probably, grandparents probably not.
Grandparents,
right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty modern.
So yeah, it seems like a pretty modern invention, right? So and the other part which I found interesting was that everything was kind of prior to that, you got your skills through apprenticeships, right? So you had that actual work experience. It wasn't through this kind of theoretical knowledge. You were actually with the doctor, with the lawyer, with the accountant and stuff like that, sitting side by side them for months, years, in order to learn your craft, and then you would be able to take that. So I think that's a very interesting thing where a lot of folks will take education for granted, right? But it's a relatively modern and recent invention, and it hasn't necessarily caught up with some of the recent changes with things like technology, right? With COVID having expedited it, where we're just transplanting whatever was designed in whatever the 1900s and 1940s and put it online, right?
Yeah.
So it probably is necessary for a realignment sometime soon. So I guess that's a great history. So thanks for taking us through that. One thing that I often have a question for is like, why do I even need to go to school, right? So I'll talk to students and they're saying, well, my parents make me go to university, but I don't even see the value because there are so many other people who aren't university educated, aren't college educated, and they're doing fine, right? So why is school important? I think you have some stats to share about from an income perspective and some other areas as well.
Well, yeah. So I personally will never tell anybody not to go to school. I will tell everybody, regardless of where you are and wherever you happen to be in life, go to school, get the skills, learn something. And you're never too old, in my opinion, to go to school or to pick up a degree or a college certificate or apprenticeship, whatever one you want to choose. But the way you have to look at it is, yes, there's always going to be the one guy that dropped out of high school in grade 9 and makes $4 million tomorrow. There's always going to be that one person that's going to be able to do that. Is that statistically likely? No, but it's going to exist. And what I like to think about is when you go to school, you're entering a lottery. And everything in life is really a probability game. And you want to put yourself in the category of the best probability of positive outcome. The way I like to do it is I like to look at median incomes. The reason why, simple, straightforward, median income is just the middle number. 50% of the population is going to be above, 50% of the population is going to be below. And the way I look at it is I want to be in the lottery with the highest middle number because that increases my chance of having a better life outcome. Okay. The rewards is bigger. And if I miss the rewards and be in the lower category, the space between 0 to that number is bigger. So generally my life is going to be better off. And when you start looking at this, it starts to tell a really interesting story. And it tells two different stories, one for men and one for women, because we live in a gendered world. So this does have an effect, even though, we'd like it to be as equal as possible. So in Ontario, because we're in Ontario, for women, if you just got your high school diploma, your median income is $44,000 and roughly. If you take up an apprenticeship, your actual median income is $37,000. If you go to college, it's $49,000. And if you do get a bachelor's degree, it's $70,000. And for men, on the other side, if you just do high school, your median income is going to be about $55,000. $80,000 a year. If you do an apprenticeship, you're going to look at 72. If you go to college, you're looking at 67. And if you go to university and get a bachelor's degree, you're looking at 85. And I know these are a lot of numbers, and they do have additionals. It's like the exact number is like 85,645, but 85 is easier to remember. When you look at that in the context of the median Ontario income is $81,000, you start going like, okay, and the median is for a family, that's 2 people. So for you, if you're female and you want to beat the odds of the median income for a full family of 2 people, you pretty much have to start to go towards the university path. Seeing that the college, high school, and the apprenticeship path actually will give you a median income that falls in line with what the median family income is for 2 people. If you're male, you're pretty much looking at, you nearly have to go to an apprenticeship program, or you have to go to a university degree to beat the median income or have a higher chance of doing that. And so that's where it gets really interesting, in the sense that the things, although we like to think about don't go to school, don't do it, for most of the population in Ontario's context, getting a bachelor's degree is one of the only ways, or one of the more sure ways, I should say, or more statistically likely ways to beat that median family income and to actually improve your life, or and to have a chance of living what's, the fancy life.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of good points, in the sense that, well, if we take that median income as kind of that 81K, if you want to be above the top 50%, then based on those other numbers that you mentioned, really the only way that you can do that is if you go that university, that college route. And obviously 81 is the combined family. So if you have both your male and female, if both the 2 partners are working, then you can take even the low ends and like whatever the 44 and the 55. That's still above the median, but that necessitates that both have to work, right? And I guess it's quite practical in this day and age. It seems like that all incomes probably have 2 income earners. So obviously that wasn't the case. Well, that wasn't the case in my parents' day, and definitely not the case in my grandparents' day. So society has shifted a little bit. So it's allowed a little bit more flexibility for that in the future. Well, right now, where if there is 2 university ones, then your income probability is higher as well. But one thing that I took from that is it's probability and not certainty, right? Because just because you went to university, you're likely have higher chances of doing that. But I mean, you could easily go on the lower 50% of whatever it is if you don't do well in university, or don't take advantage of like the work experience or co-op or whatever programs, where you end up not being as competitive in the workforce as maybe some of your classmates that are in there. So I think it's a good argument to say that, well, statistically, be in the higher percentage, you want to do that. And I would echo the sentiment that I would encourage everyone to go and seek out some sort of schooling or education, but don't necessarily just go there for the sake of the education or that piece of paper or whatever. Take it for the learning and the growth and what you're going to do with it, because some people have that where I'm just doing it for the sake of doing it versus, well, I'm doing it for true learning. So hopefully that gives a compelling reason for folks to want to kind of pursue that education. And I think you had some other thoughts that you want to share in regards to like different industries and areas, and in terms of where you go into as well.
Yeah, that's the part to add layer to the complexity of the probability game is, it also depends on industry and what you decide to study, or what you decide to do with that studies. I personally, from my last time, I started in history, ended up in disaster management, and do education and work with labor market. So it often comes down to the combination of a whole bunch of stuff together that allows you to take up what your final occupation is going to be. But for example, right now in our COVID environment, unemployment across the entire field hasn't hit everywhere evenly. If you're in the food services, or if you're in the warehouse services, you've seen a massive decrease in the amount of employment opportunities or jobs, just because there's not as much retailability right now. You can't go to the store, as well as even in transportation services. So if you went to school for logistic purposes or a topic like that, you might actually find yourself on the short end of the stick given the current financial situation. Alternatively, if you went into the financial services right now, or if you went into the professional sciences and technology, COVID is not a bad thing for you, actually. You're actually seeing a boom in your employment numbers. The Ontario numbers, for example, if you were to pick a random occupation, if you're in wholesaling and retailing, you're looking at negative 73,000 jobs right now. Wow. If you are in the insurance professional zone, you're looking at a plus 33,000 jobs. So it comes down to what occupation is you're in and what happens in the labor market at that time as well. So I always go for education as a whole. Don't beat yourself up on, I spent all this money in school. It's $45,000 to $60,000. It's as much as a sports car. So, bought yourself a sports car, which most people buy at some point in the future, mortgage it over 7 to 10 years. So don't feel bad. Most people are spending the same amount. But what you're really buying is the opportunity to have the skill set to adapt to whatever happens in the labor market. Sure, you could be in logistics warehousing right now, and all of a sudden we lose 25,000 jobs. But because you had those skill set, you could transfer to maybe manufacturing or supply chain and manufacturing right now, which is plus 14,000 jobs. Or maybe you understand the complexities of moving stuff and moving equipment and what that needs, and you become really useful for the professional sciences, which is also having a boom right now. So you kind of have to look at it from the perspective of what you're really investing is in your own capacity. And don't undervalue your own capacity, and people shouldn't undervalue their own capacity. They need to believe in that and see that to actually utilize the fullness of what university can offer or what education can give.
Yeah, and what I took from that is university or education is definitely a worthwhile investment, right? And like if you're going to treat yourself to a sports car, you might as well treat yourself to a university degree, that sort of thing. But the other part which I found interesting was that, well, you mentioned really cultivating a skill set, right? So it's almost like really what you want to do is learn how to learn, right? As part of that. The skills, a lot of the transferable skills, you probably want to emphasize a little bit as well, in addition to whatever you're learning in your particular industry. Because what I took from this is if I took a snapshot of this in, let's say, circa 2008, 2009, well, it would have painted a very different picture, because I think that the financial services would be way down compared to other things. And then if I take it from 2002 in the dot-com bubble, then the tech one would be totally
they're totally down.
So it's one of those things where, like, because we're taking a snapshot right now, doesn't mean that's how it will be and how it'll stay. So it's less on the where you are right now. If you can adapt yourself and say, you know what, kind of that Wayne Gretzky quote of skate to where the puck is instead of where it is or where it was, then you'll often be in a better shape. And the other part is, if you kind of quote unquote future-proof yourself by learning to learn and all those foundational skills about like critical thinking and all that sort of stuff, relationship building, all that, it doesn't really matter if you're in tech, if you're in finance, if you're in accommodation and food services, because I'm sure after all this, like, they'll have a boom because everyone wants to go out, everyone wants to travel, everyone wants to do all that. So there'll be not enough, and you'll probably be doing really well if you're in the industry once some of the recovery happens. So
definitely. And I think that comes down to something that you definitely highlighted, and which you're great at, is that interpersonal skills and having those interpersonal skills, because that's what's going to carry you into the future. These numbers are going to change by next month, and they'll change a year from now, and so on from now until the end of time, or whenever we get super robots that do all of our work for us. But it'll continue to change, and people need to know how to communicate and to evolve with that, and how to just be people.
Yeah, and speaking about kind of the future, so we probably want to have a little bit of a discussion on the future of education, right? So far the education system, we talked about how kind of from the monastic times, people were kind of getting a general education. People were more on the apprenticeship side up to kind of the world wars, and then after the world wars is where we kind of really see our current modern university system, but COVID has changed that, right? Where everything's kind of online, where a lot of it has been replicated, but now there are a lot of different disruptions and changes in the education spectrum, in the industry, in the domain. What are some of the changes that you're seeing that you're excited about, that you think will really kind of coalesce, or it might be too early to tell, but what are some of the things that are kind of sparking your imagination in the education industry?
Well, sparking my imagination is really access. The rate at which access to education is being spread out, and not only just through traditional means as such as the university sphere, but also through the what would be considered the at-home learning sphere as well. The example is Udemy getting more and more certificates that are actually really useful, actual career building certificates. The introduction of a lot of universities that previously were not in the space of providing online learning coming in, and also the completely disruptive consortiums of groups of or motivated individuals, or what I would describe as a network education hybrids, where pretty much they are providing what would qualify as a university program, many of them in the business field or business sphere, but also combining that with direct mentorship in that program off the bat. So I think that there's a lot of interesting evolution coming out, and it's all powered by really technology that we've had for the last 5 years, but nobody wanted to really use it because there wasn't really the cost structure to do it.
Right.
In my opinion, everybody could show up still to a university. They could sit in a classroom, but now we're forced to because of COVID. We've had all this technology before. Everybody could Skype and FaceTime, but it's kind of precipitated the definite tying of the two together, which I think provides amazing opportunities for pretty much everyone everywhere to learn. It will just what will be interesting is to see how the costing starts playing into that, because now there's pretty much options for everyone, from free education through the MOOCs and the massive online repositories to expensive Ivy League education from Harvard, which is providing the same service. And I'm curious to see how that's going to play out as everybody starts competing, and competition usually brings better education for its consumers.
For sure. And I think part of it is also the legacy of some of the prestige of these organizations, right? So I don't think, I presume something like a Harvard, it has kind of that global recognition, will always have a presence, right? So they'll hopefully be able to adapt where they'll be on the education stage and once they perform. It's kind of those middle tier universities that nobody's really heard of that probably might be in a bit of trouble. And obviously the lower tier ones where maybe they'll get it based on just pure price point, where it's just cheap and available. But with things like technology, it's kind of totally changing the model, where how much is the prestige of a particular school worth, right? Maybe something with like an Ivy League reputation like a Harvard is worth a lot, but university of name the city, right? How does that university play on the world stage, right? Or even on the local stage for that matter, and how much is that worth? So it's kind of interesting how things will disrupt. And what's interesting to me is things like companies like Google, who are actually offering certificate programs too, right? So instead of getting a degree at the university of whatever, I can get a degree from the University of Google, right? And which is going to make me a little bit more employable. Well, this university that might be known for that, or a large company, right? So as more companies like Google are trying to really get onto the education side, I think that'll be an interesting one. Obviously we talked a little bit about Udemy, and then obviously some of the schools that are putting their offerings online, from like the Coursera's of offering things like that, where now you don't have to be in that actual city or that location. You can take it from anywhere. And even they have like the cohorted versions where you can actually participate online with the class and have people grade your marks and stuff. So it's not just the typical self-directed and then follow at your own pace type of thing. You're actually with someone. So it's kind of more of that hybrid model, which I think is really interesting. And things like Seth Godin has this concept called the Alt MBA, where it's not actually an MBA, but he's a great marketer, so he spun it in a way where people would want to buy. And from my understanding of how the program works, it's actually a lot of coach and facilitated discussions where it's not really a professor talking about something specific. It's everyone learning about a concept and idea together and doing a lot of deliverables. So it's a little bit more that democratized type of education where it's not like just the professor or the instructor, lecturer, or whatever. People are learning from each other, and by asking questions of each other, they're poking holes in people's arguments and research and whatever, and they're helping each other grow. So I think those are interesting. And then things like Khan Academy, which is one where in the kind of K to 12 space where it's building off of that mastery learning where you're not just progressing because you grew a year older. You move when you are actually ready and understand what you are learning, right? So I think those types of concepts where now you can have everyone have their own learning path, right? And then it'll be interesting to see how the public education system, the private education system will adapt. So obviously that was from the K to 12, but I would imagine you can bring that forward to the university. And one of the things I'm most excited about is that there are like these little boot camps that are popping up where, and again, I think it's more pervasive in tech just because of the speed at which things change. But in 4 months, you can kind of learn and get the amount of employability that someone with a 4-year degree would get, right? Now, is it the same? And not really, because there is something to do with time and age and stuff. But my view is you can probably do a boot camp for pretty much anything, right? Do you?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, like do you need that long to become a teacher, right? Could you intensively train someone in 4 months? Maybe not the 100%, but at least 80% of what's productive, you can definitely teach in a shorter amount of time. And I would imagine even things like being a doctor or lawyer, like one of the things that is quite fascinating for me is to become a lawyer, you need a 4-year undergrad in whatever you want. Right? So how does that help prepare you to be a lawyer? Like if yes, it helps for people exploring, but if I want to be a lawyer, just get me the fastest path to being a lawyer, right? Instead of 4 years of doing something I don't really need to do, right? So those are some interesting things from an educational kind of throwback that are now you're seeing the cracks in the foundation where other players and different ways of doing it. To allow for more efficiency and more effectiveness in that training. So it's less about kind of going to school and as we talked about, more getting that education and learning, because you can learn an awful lot off of YouTube, right?
Well, no, you can learn an awful lot off of YouTube, but I don't think there's a skill you can't learn anymore off the internet for free. I'm nearly sure that nearly most knowledge that anybody could ever need is online somewhere for free, and you can pick it up. I think and when I think about the future of education, as education becomes more and more ubiquitous and more available, I think the next challenge, or the challenge that is going to face, is more of certification bodies deciding their own certification systems and setting up their own rules, and professional bodies more so than necessarily the education institution itself becoming the blockade. It's like teachers need to go 2 years at teachers college or do the 1 year after they finish a degree to qualify for their licensing body. HR professionals need a certificate then to finish the exam to qualify for this occupation. And I think what the one part that I think falls in the background of the story of education, which even my history example did kind of gloss over a little bit, is the aspect that we still live in a very trades or guild-oriented society. So we have professional guilds that dominate occupations and then dictate to the public, how do you join that guild?
Right.
And I think what I think will be interesting in the future for what will transform education is as the supremacy of these guilds start to come into question of how you learn. If you can access all the knowledge to pass all the exams anywhere, why is the process required in this specific way? And I think that as that becomes more of a question and that becomes challenge, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of shifts in education space as a whole. And I'm excited to see it. And I'm also excited to see the internationalization of education, to start seeing a world in which your location where you got your degree transfers to anywhere else on the planet. And it works strongly for a lot of Western universities still currently. If you went to Oxford, you show up in Canada, people are like, oh, wow, you went to a cool place. If I went to the University of Outer Mongolia, which is the best in mining rare earth minerals, and I show up here and go like, hey, I'm one of the experts in mining, people look at it kind of funny. And I'm excited to see, as labor becomes more international, also our certifications and our qualifications becoming more international, to the point at which in the utopia world, it nearly doesn't matter where on the planet you are, you can have access to the highest level of education.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point because, well, we're here in Canada and we're a country of immigrants and newcomers, and there's so many internationally trained, very smart, very capable and strong people. But unfortunately, there's this kind of myth of Canadian experience, Canadian education, which is highly prized, even though it's probably the same and it might be even better elsewhere, right? But it is part of kind of like the mindsets and perspectives of many out there. And a very interesting point on kind of that guild orientation, because yeah, I guess that makes sense. That the University of whatever is just a guild that certifies this person knows how to do like accounting, marketing, or whatever, right? And there's certain kind of regulatory bodies out there for that certify that this person passed a bunch of exams and knows how to do this certain thing. But what if someone else says, well, no, we can do it better? So I think that would be kind of akin to what Google is doing, to say, hey, we know how we want our developers, programmers to behave or whatever. And if you want people of that kind of skill set, then we have certified it, even though it's different than what these other certifying bodies or guilds have.
Yeah, and they can do it. And I think it's interesting, right? You start getting into employer certified skills, which employers kind of already do on the back end when you join. Every organization has its learning and development center, and it has its core competencies that it wants its employees to gain. And there's going to be a soft skills one. There's going to be a technical skills area, and there's going to be, for my world, political acuity, stuff like this. There's always these fun words that are going to be made, and then we're going to have a certification program to it. It'd be amazing to have these certification programs internally also transferable between organizations. And I think it's fascinating what Google is doing, and many other companies as well are doing, where they're just going like, well, why can't we be a certifying body?
Sure. Yeah, and that's probably a good question that, well, we don't have the answers to right now, but it'll be very interesting to see what the future will hold. And I think that'll be a moving target in the sense, well, like different questions will come up that will necessitate kind of different answers. And it probably won't be a one-stop solution, right? And it might be based on industry, it might be based on country, region, might be based on all sorts of different factors that have different solutions. But I think it was a very interesting discussion for me. I learned a lot in terms of education, and I'm hopeful and interested to see what some of the other things that we just talked about from a future of education kind of what falls into place in the coming years and decades. But yeah, thanks so much, Michael, for sharing your insights on education. Are there any kind of parting words or any interesting aspects of education that you'd also want to share with the audience?
Parting words, I'm gonna go with everybody just go to school, just grab those skills, gain those skills. It's not about the paper, getting those skills. And also, honestly, be creative. It's amazing what you can combine.
Yeah. And I would echo that. I think what came to mind for the first one is that Mark Twain quote: "Don't let school get in the way of education." So make sure you get that education, get the skills, as Michael mentioned. Less fussed about the actual like piece of paper that you get. And the other part about the creativity, I would echo that too. Where that's probably one of the skills that the AI and the robots and the machine learning won't take away from us. At least not until much later on. So if you want to have kind of future-proof yourself, then take a look at creativity. And creativity is not just the fine arts like painting and dancing and drawing. There's creativity in teaching. There's creativity in accounting and engineering. There's all sorts of creativity everywhere. So thanks so much, Michael, for joining us, and
No
hope
problem.
you'll be back for a future episode.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at LukiDanu, LukiDanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.